If you're after an all-wheel drive estate car with a modicum of off-road ability, decent space and a relatively affordable price, then Skoda's Octavia Scout makes a sensible choice. As sales of conventional 4x4 SUVs flounder, the motor industry has come up with a couple of alternatives that keep this class of cars chunky good looks and at least some of its off-road ability. Now, those who like a traditional SUV's raised driving position are being targeted by so-called crossovers, essentially tall family hatchbacks with optional all-wheel drive, but they're pretty useless in anything other than a muddy car park. If you want to keep at least a modicum of off-road ability, but don't want a traditional 4x4 SUV, then you're better off going for a purpose-built estate, something like this one, Skoda's Octavia Scout. Now, the problem is that cars of this kind can be pretty expensive, unreasonably so, you might think. People habitually pay in the £30,000 to £40,000 bracket for models like Volvo's XC70 or an Audi Allroad. Subaru's Forester, yes, that's a bit cheaper, but it's simply not big enough for some customers, which means that this Skoda is some people's only alternative. Now, the Czech company has long offered an all-wheel drive version of its Octavia estate, but in 2007 they decided to go a step further and bring us this Scout model for people that wanted to venture very slightly further out into the rough. Now, here we're looking at the improved second generation version that features the better fourth generation Haldex clutch system that's also fitted to the standard Octavia 4x4 estate. Now, Skoda is keen to tell us that this Scout rides a full 40mm higher than the standard Octavia estate and 17mm higher than the 4x4 version of that car. But it's worth putting that into some sort of frame of reference. With 179mm of draft between its wheels, this car isn't quite up to the height standard of some of its SUV soft road rivals, say Toyota's RAV4, that's at 191mm, Volvo's XC70, 200mm, Subaru's Forester, 205mm. Even Audi's decidedly tarmac orientated A4 Allroad is 180mm off the ground. So you won't be wanting to aim this Octavia Scout at tracks that are too deeply rutted. Instead, if you go for things that are a bit more level off-road, it should do just fine. And in any case, the real determination factor of a car's ability off-road isn't the ground clearance anyway, it's tyres. Equipping this Octavia with a set of all-terrain, more mud-orientated rubberware will probably be the best thing you could do to give it more ability when going off-piste. Now, unlike some rivals, but just like the standard Octavia 4x4, this car features permanent all-wheel drive. Now, that doesn't mean that it functions in four-wheel drive all of the time. It just means that its functioning is completely transparent. You don't have to push any buttons or manhandle any levers inside the car to switch to four-driven wheels. In normal operating conditions, 100% of the drive is directed towards the front, but should the fourth generation Haldex coupling system detect any slippage, then a proportion of the drive can then be shared with the rear wheels. In fact, this system is so sophisticated that it can direct up to 86% of torque to a single wheel. Now, there's also full integration with the traction and braking system so that you don't get that tiresome loading up on the steering during parking manoeuvres that afflict some 4x4s. The 2-litre TDI 140 diesel engine looks to be the pick of the Scout pack, and it's demonstrated in the standard Octavia that it can be a surprisingly entertaining engine. With 320 Newton meters of torque to call upon, it surges from rest to 60 in just over 10 seconds on the way to a top speed of around 122 miles an hour. Now, with just 250 Newton meters of torque to call upon, the 1.8 litre petrol engine that I'm actually driving here won't be quite as popular, but it's a surprisingly likeable engine with seamless turbo urge, and it's also quite a bit faster, getting from rest to 60 in 8.4 seconds on the way to a top speed of 131 miles an hour. Now, most potential customers should think this car a handsome thing with its redesigned front grille and its revised bumpers front and rear that tack about 1 centimetre onto the overall length. Now, protective strips around the wheel housings and body coloured side mouldings are there to keep your Scout looking fresh, as are the profile door sills, the front two of which have the Scout badge engraved upon them. There's also an underbody sump guard to protect against expensive knocks. Now, in contrast, the smart alloy wheels are an unashamed concession to lifestyle, but none the worse for that. At the wheel, improvements that Skoda have made to all Octavias in recent times have given this car a classy enough feel for potential buyers to begin to think that it might be a credible alternative to a Volvo XC70 or an Audi Allroad. Enhancements to the trim, the switchgear and the entertainment systems work well. There's a smarter steering wheel, classier instrument graphics and the option of a high-tech touchscreen sat-nav. In the back here, passenger room is generous with admirable rear legroom, even when the front seats are being occupied by long-limbed adults. Now, as with all Octavia estates, the wheel at each corner stance hints at very good packaging, and sure enough, there's 1,655 litres of room in here with all the seats folded. Even if you've a full complement of passengers on board, there's 605 litres with all the seats in place. And unlike many medium-range models that are estates, you've got none of the wheel arch intrusion that you tend to get right at the back here. So it's a square, easily accessible carpeted load area. Now, inside here, the designers have also made provision for a ski hatch so that you can poke longer items like skis or maybe pipes through to the interior. Now, the sheer attention to detail is impressive. There are no fewer than 6 loading lashing eyes here on the floor that keep heavy items from moving about during transit, with 4 further plastic ones further up the loading bay side here and a retractable hook each side. So there's no real excuse for stuff moving about when you're going about country roads. There's also a power charging point and a thoughtful compartment here to keep smaller valuable items out of sight. Skoda have even put a serrated edge on the top of the loading lip here, so that if you're putting a heavy item in, you've got somewhere to rest it for a moment before you put it into the main compartment. And you've got beefy gas struts here to keep the tailgate well out of the way, leaving you plenty of room to manoeuvre. Inside, you've got bottle-shaped compartments in the front door bins. You've got another little compartment under the front armrest here, and upholstery that's exclusive to this model that seems tough and durable. There's even a grab handle here to keep front seat passengers who are of a more nervous disposition in place during steep descents. Now, list prices suggest that you'll pay from just under £20,000 for a petrol Scout and from just over £21,000 if you want a diesel version. Now, that's similar money to that which you'd pay for a Subaru Forester, but there are savings of between £7,000 to £9,000 at least to be had over equivalent Volvo XC70 or Audi Allroad models. Still, of course, for the same sort of money, you could also be considering a conventional small SUV like a Nissan X-Trail or a Honda CR-V. But the whole point of cars like this Scout is that they don't carry an SUV's social stigma or that kind of car's relative roly-poly handling. Whether you choose this 1.8 litre TSI engine or the 2 litre TDI diesel alternative, there's a premium of around £1,100 to pay over a standard Octavia 4x4 estate. Now, equipment levels include most of what you would expect. So you've got dual zone climate control, you've got ESP, stability control, tinted glass, cruise control, aluminium pedals and rear acoustic parking sensors. Now, this Scout doesn't really cost that much more to run than a standard Octavia 4x4, which in turn doesn't really cost much more to run than a standard Octavia estate. So what does all that mean in day-to-day motoring and cost of ownership figures? Well, if you go for the 1.8 litre petrol model that I'm driving here, you can expect to get 36.2 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle and 182 grams per kilometre of CO2. Now the TDI 140 diesel easily betters this, of course, but not by as much as you might think. You'll get 44.1 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle and put out 173 grams per kilometre of CO2. Residuals should be strong. This car is in reasonably high demand on the used market due to its strong build quality. You'll get about 40% of what you paid back after 3 years and 36,000 miles. And insurance groups, well, you're looking at Group 10 for the petrol and Group 12 for the diesel. Now, if you want a car of this kind, buying an Octavia Scout is a pragmatic solution. Now, this Skoda won't appeal to posers and badge snobs, of course, it's too no-nonsense for that, but it adds up as a car for people with active lifestyles who want something very slightly more rugged than a standard Octavia 4x4 and don't mind paying a premium for it. A sensible choice then. Scout's honour.